Hi, and welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, two moderates vie for a U.S. congressional seat for Montgomery County, a popular Republican incumbent, and a challenger, Terry Lierman, who says a vote for Connie Morella is a vote for Republican control of the House. Hepatitis, a recent outbreak on Maryland's Solomon's Island, has us looking at the ABCs of this liver disease. Hepatitis aside, if you like the beach and natural history, the Solomons may be just the place for you. Also, ever wonder about what writers get paid for their works that later show up on the web? You may be surprised. They certainly were. We've got a Rebecca Villarreal poem and music by Fortaleza, Tinsmith, Liz Goldberg, and Magpie.
Hi, and welcome to the forum at the Coffee House. Bush versus Gore down to the wire. But more than the White House is at stake November 7th. The Republican Party's weak hold on both houses of Congress is also in doubt, and a small swing in votes could shift the balance. The GOP has high hopes of picking up Chuck Robb's Senate seat in Virginia. Republican prospects for beating incumbent Paul Sarbanes in Maryland are far bleaker, and most of the House races in Maryland are only nominally contested. There's one exception: heavily Democratic Montgomery County. The far eastern part of the county is represented by Democrat Al Wynn, but most of Montgomery County is represented in Congress by Republican Connie Morella. The odds makers expect her to prevail once again on November 7th. Ross Adams has more.
After 14 years on Capitol Hill, Connie Morella is still doing what she does best: talking to the people. Morella is running for an 8th term in Congress. Her secret to success? Knowing the people of her district.
My voting record reflects the people that I represent. I take very seriously the fact that I'm in the People's House, the House of Representatives, and I believe that my votes, the issues I've promoted, the services I've provided, all reflect the values and the vision of the people of the 8th Congressional District.
And Morella is frequently praised for fighting for her district.
I look at each issue on the basis of how it affects my country, my constituency, and my conscience.
Given her popularity and how she takes care of her district, beating Morella may be but an impossible dream. 2 years ago, Morella trounced her high-profile Democratic challenger, Ralph Nees, with 62% of the vote.
I want to be that independent person who is a Republican, who represents all the people of the district. I feel it very strongly. I always have. And the people of this district do not vote party label. They do not vote rhetoric. They vote actions.
One issue facing Congresswoman Morella is how does a Republican keeps getting reelected in such a heavily Democratic district? Morella is hardly in the mainstream of the Republican Party when casting votes on the House floor. And some say she may be even more liberal than her Democratic opponent, Terry Lierman.
Morella is actually in the mainstream of the party, only she's more in the mainstream of the Democratic Party than the GOP. At least that's what ratings of Congress members by PIRG suggest. PIRG, the Public Interest Research Group, was founded by Ralph Nader. So that begs the question: how committed is Morella to the Republican Party? Let's say she is reelected on November 7th, and let's say that after the election, Democrats are one vote shy of a majority in the House. The Democrats will likely offer Morella the moon, or at least her choice of committee assignments and seniority, to switch parties. Would she do it?
Regardless of which party is going to be the majority, the decisions on the critical issues are going to be made by very few people, and they're going to be the people who are in the center, where I am and have been.
But which party controls Congress does matter. The majority party runs the committees and sets the legislative agenda. It's the difference between whether the Judiciary Committee, for example, is led by conservative Republicans Henry Hyde and James Sessenbrenner, or liberal Democrats John Conyers and Barney Frank. For Morella, the top issues in this campaign are education and health care, traditionally Democratic issues.
I am a sponsor of the Patient's Bill of Rights to make sure that physicians and patients have some control over their health care and not the HMOs and administrators.
And on the global economy, Morella has supported all the major trade pacts in recent years, including permanent trading relations with mainland China.
I believe very much in free and fair trade. There is no way that we should isolate ourselves as a protectionist nation, because we are all interconnected.
And it's staying connected that seems to be the key to Morella's staying power. For the Coffee House, I'm Ross Adams.
Connie Morella was invited to join us in the studio for this show, but declined on account of end-of-session votes in the House. But her Democratic opponent is here, Terry Lierman, a Bethesda businessman. He's the man with the dream of unseating Morella. He says it's not impossible. Welcome to the Coffee House.
Thank you. Delighted to be here. The House went out of session several hours ago.
Well, we're sorry she couldn't make it. Not impossible, you say. No elected official has dared to run against Connie Morella for 10 years, despite the fact that Montgomery County is 51% registered Democratic, 31% Republican. What makes you think you can beat her?
3 reasons. Number 1, timing. People have finally started to get what your message before this program started, that it is the Congress that counts and it's the leadership of Congress. It is different if Democrats are running or House members are run by Republicans. That will determine the agenda for the next 2 years of the Congress. And people in this district really understand now that it does matter what that first vote, you want one who votes for Democratic leadership or one for Republican leadership. Secondly is timing. There was a March 7th primary this year, which I got 62% of the vote in, the biggest vote for Democrat in over 14 years. That alone has woken people up to the issue of we really have a viable candidate this time. Third is the message of issues. People in this district want gun control. The Republicans won't do it. The Republican leadership that she supports won't even vote on a bill on the House floor. The Republican leadership that she votes to put in place tried to cut elementary education, pre-K, Head Start, after-school teacher training by $3 billion below the president's budget request. Transportation. We've received 0 transportation funding for mass transit increases in 6 years of the Republican Congress. It's time for a change.
You've been a Hill staffer in the past. You've been a civic activist with a lot of work in the areas of health care and education. You're a businessman and apparently have made quite a bit of money doing that as well. And you have been pretty successful in raising money for this campaign, and in fact had President Clinton speak at one of your fundraisers. How much do you expect to spend on this campaign?
I think this will be at least $1 million campaign. I think the bottom line is that we have to get elected, and in order to get elected you need name visibility and recognition. And unfortunately, television, as you know, costs a lot to produce and to get the message out.
And how much are you prepared to spend out of your own pocket?
We haven't decided that yet. It's going to be a matter of what it's going to take to get the job done, but I don't expect we're going to have to put in much more than what we're going to raise. I believe very firmly that the people are so engaged by the issues. We have over 1,400 volunteers already in this campaign that are just coming out of the woodwork. And the response at the subway stops, at the coffees that we go to, at the events that we do, has been really, really rewarding. People are ready for a change, and they get it.
Well, let's talk about the issues. Health care. It's a big issue to you. You favor universal health care coverage. And you say that in your campaign literature that you'd like to model it on a Medicare model. Are you saying that you favor a single-payer type of health care plan as opposed to a managed care system?
Well, it's been demonstrated time and time again. When you talk about managed care, it's more managed cost than it is managed care. That's the first point I'd like to make. Also, a Republican Congress has not been able to pass even a patient's Bill of Rights. We can't even determine who we want to go to and what services we want. But to specifically answer your question, I prefer universal coverage for everybody. You know, we have almost 800,000 people in this state now without any coverage or very low coverage. That's just not acceptable. That's just in the state of Maryland. I prefer universal coverage, which would be modeled on the Medicare plan or on the federal plan. Pick a few that we can choose from. It's important that we keep competition in the healthcare system because competition creates quality.
You also have a focus on education, and you're calling for free public education through college. How would that work? Are you talking about free tuition, free room and board, free books? Is this means tested? Is it for everybody? How would it be financed? When would it kick in?
Well, the specifics haven't, frankly, been worked out yet, but I'm on the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and I have been for 5 years. The two biggest issues while I served on the commission was access and quality of education. We have the second highest tuition in the United States of America now in this state for our public colleges and universities. That is a question of access. That won't allow people to go in many cases. You know, when I went to college in 1967, it meant something to go to college. Now what it means is it's almost the same as getting a high school degree was when I graduated from high school in 1966. Access should be available to everybody that is qualified. Maybe it's a C average, a C plus average, whatever the case may be. But no one should be denied access to college because of not being able to pay for it.
Well, that one question is grades. That is, what do you need to get into college?
Right.
The other is whether it should be free and whether the state should be providing public education at the university level free of charge. And how would we pay for that?
Well, you could pay for it. You have a plethora now of programs. Bureaucracy to run our loan programs, our grant programs, is really amazing. We did a study with some people from the National Association of State Colleges and land-grant universities and came up with the total tab for the entire nation for free public education for the same number of students going to college at public colleges and universities would be about $4 to $5 billion. You know, what's the cost of our children not going to college in this country? That may sound like a bit of money, and it is a lot of money. But if you look at the other end of kids not going to school because they can't afford it, that's a whole life that we're talking about. And I think it's time for us to realize that a pre-K through college is the kind of education we should be talking about in light of the fact that when I graduated, a high school degree was a big deal. Now a college degree is a big deal. And you can't really get any job without a college degree nowadays. So it should be part of our public education system. At a minimum, to get started, we should provide an education through at least 2 years of community college. And we're blessed in this area with Montgomery Community College. It's probably one of the best in the nation.
In your introductory remarks, you were critical of Connie Morella's positions or lack of action on transportation policy. The area is the second most congested in the country on the highways, and much of the conversation about how to solve that has to do with ICC or ICC light parkways or a highway. What's your attitude about how we should solve the congestion problem?
I think a balanced, environmentally acceptable approach to transportation. My master's degree is in urban and regional planning, and I've been involved in this area quite a long time just as a student of it. We need massive increases for mass transportation. I think we should have mass transportation from Bethesda to Frederick. We should have on Georgia Avenue, there's room for express bus lanes or light rail. We should be funding the Purple Line with additional stops in Montgomery County, which would connect the entire Beltway and circumvent the Beltway. As far as roads are concerned, after we have environmentally sound ideas, i.e. mass transit, large increases in bus transportation, then we can talk about access and roads and where we should go and how they should be funded. There's no doubt that we're going to need some place and somehow, especially on east-west access, but we have got to do it as a balanced approach. Pay attention to all three.
Free trade, fair trade. Where do you come down?
Well, you know, it probably depends on the issue, but I'm certainly not an isolationist. I think free trade is probably the wave of the future. We as a country have got to recognize that borders really don't exist anymore. The internet has kind of wiped those off the map, if not the television screen. I think that we as a country have to recognize that from a commerce standpoint, from a business standpoint, and from an education standpoint, that be it environmental issues, be it education issues, be it globalization of business, they're here to stay and we should learn to deal with them.
Should we trade with countries that don't honor workers' right to organize unions?
I think we should be trading with all countries, but we should put economic pressure on countries to continue the way we're going to be trading, that they should have environmentally sound policies of industrialization. They should have fair workers' policies, which includes the right to unionize, fair wages, not prison laborers that we have in so many areas.
How do we do that? How do we force them to do that or pressure them to do that?
Well, if we're not part of the global community, we won't be pressuring them because we're not at all able to buy
But
their goods and
we
their
control the
products.
global community in many ways, so that's not an issue. But what should we do in order to pressure other countries to honor environmental standards and labor rights?
It's economic pressure. It's how we buy, what we buy, when we buy, and what our attitudes are towards their country with aid, be it third world countries and providing aid to the Agency for International Development. I think there should be an expansion of that, as a matter of fact, so that we don't have so many haves and have-not nations. If you want to talk about things like stability in the world, talk about issues of giving people not arms, but economic aid and educational assistance so they can lift themselves up. There are very few stable countries in this world that really are in trouble or are hotspots. The problems are where there's bad education programs, no good health care, and there's no hope, so that's what happens.
Very quickly, you mentioned before we should use our buying power. Should we use our buying power also? Should the federal government use its buying power in order to make a dent in global warming? To wit, should the federal government set as a standard requirement that all new automobile purchases for its automobile fleet be using hybrid cars or fuel cells or something that that does not burn fossil fuels?
I have to tell you, that's very important. And I say this for one reason. Right now we're talking about a global energy crisis. How many have I been through in the last probably 20 years? We're going to be paying the reaper one of these days, and we as a country have not addressed at all the energy problems.
We're running
of
out
this
of time.
country.
Is that a yes?
That is a yes.
Thank you. Thanks so much to Terry Lierman for joining me in the coffee house. We'll soon know whether he's just another in a line of candidates to tilt at the Connie Morella windmill, or whether Terry Lierman is the one to do more than just dream the impossible dream. Still ahead, the A's through G's of hepatitis. Freelancers stake copyright claims to their works on the web. Fossil hunting on Maryland's western shore. A Rebecca Villarreal poem, and musical selections by Magpie, Liz Goldberg, Tinsmith, and Fortaleza.
Laughter and Sickness and Health at the Coffee House. You probably heard the news that more than 20 people fell ill with a liver virus called Hepatitis A after enjoying a meal at a popular restaurant in Maryland's Solomon's Island. The victims will probably recover well, but other types of hepatitis can permanently damage or even kill us. Your liver is a tremendously hard-working organ, the size of a football, tucked under your right ribs. Among other things, it stores vitamins and gets rid of harmful substances. When it comes under attack, whether from alcohol, toxins, or viruses, your whole body suffers. Here to talk about the growing number of liver viruses and what we can do about them is Dr. Leslye Johnson, head of the Enteric and Hepatic Diseases branch at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Johnson, welcome to the Coffee House.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks. The people who caught hepatitis A in Maryland probably will feel pretty sick, but then recover quite well, won't they?
That's absolutely true. Hepatitis A is one of the hepatitis viruses that people get sick but then recover from.
And how would they feel sick?
Oh, they would be fatigued, very weak, nauseous. They could be vomiting. They could have diarrhea. Lots of different things.
Sounds nasty, but nice to know you get over it.
Yes.
They'll have immunity or for life, or not necessarily?
Once you've had an infection with hepatitis A, you do develop a marvelous antibody response that does last lifelong.
Okay. There are plenty of letters now for the different hepatitises, A to G. Perhaps you could explain a little bit about what they are and how they distinguish from each other and what they do to hurt our livers.
I'd be happy to. Viruses, or all living organisms, are kind of classified and named, like genus and species, etc. The hepatitis viruses, unfortunately, didn't have a physical characterization before the disease was recognized, so we ended up with A, B, and non-A, non-B, even before we really knew what the viruses were. As we learned what they were, then we were able to give them a more classical name, like hepatinovirus for hepatitis B. And gradually, as other viruses have been added, D, E, F kind of fell by the wayside, and hepatitis G, we've just been adding more letters to the alphabet, and then after that, adding a real genus, family, species type name.
So F doesn't exist. They made a mistake.
I gave it a name too quickly, and it turned out not to be a real hepatitis virus.
Okay, but there's G, and are we counting? Are there perhaps going to be others?
I would think that there probably will be others. Right now we can account for, if you take a look at transfusion hepatitis or hepatitis spread by the blood, we can account for 90% of what's going on with the letters that we currently have, but there's another 10% that we don't have a virus that we can associate with the hepatitis.
Here in the States, our main concern is with A, B, and C. Is that right? What's D?
D is a virus that is defective.
Okay.
It's missing something. And in order for it to replicate, it has to use hepatitis B virus.
Okay, so it piggybacks on that.
Right, exactly.
And E is not in this country?
E is not a problem in this country. It's mainly spread by fecal-oral route due to poor sanitation, contaminated water, which is not much of a problem in this country.
And G?
G is prevalent in this country. It tends to end up being a chronic infection, but it doesn't seem to be associated with liver disease. It is a virus that was identified by recombinant DNA out of a person who had hepatitis, out of a liver, but it's not the virus that was causing that hepatitis.
So let's get back to the ABCs of the hepatitis. A is, how is that spread? What can we do about it?
A is spread the same way as hepatitis E is. It's a fecal-oral spread. And basically what that means is if you have contact with a stool and don't wash your hands, then and you're infected, you can spread the virus. If a restaurant worker doesn't wash their hands, or someone in a daycare center who's changing diapers doesn't wash their hands, and the stool that they came in contact had the virus in it, then they can transmit the virus to other people.
Goodness. I was very surprised to learn that 33% of Americans have shown that they've had hepatitis A, whether or not they realize they had it. Yet some people do get very sick. Is it the difference is children don't get sick from this?
Children routinely do not get sick. In fact, with most of the hepatitis viruses, a lot of people don't have symptoms. They don't have strong symptoms. They can feel like they have the flu. They're a little tired or run down, their stomach's upset, but there are no strong symptoms such as the yellow eyes, the jaundice, that type of symptom that's often associated with hepatitis.
How about B? Children, newborns are vaccinated against B, so it must be taken pretty seriously to try and vaccinate the whole U.S. population against it. Can you explain a little bit about it?
I can. Transmission of hepatitis B occurs perinatally, in other words, at birth, from an infected mother to the infant. And in that case, 90% of those infants become chronic carriers for life.
What about adults?
And the health consequences come from the chronic carriage in most cases. Adults, the number is 10%, 8% of adults who are infected, or even children above the age of 8 or 10, go on to become chronic carriers. So it's a disease with much less impact in adults long term.
But they'd still feel, a chronic carrier would feel pretty rotten most of the time, would they?
Not necessarily.
Really?
There are what are called, in quotes, healthy carriers that don't have a lot of symptoms. There are also very sick carriers who have extraordinary symptoms because their liver is going into stages of cirrhosis or liver failure.
Yes. And C, how about that one, which is very different from the other two?
C is very different from the others, even though C, like B, is spread through the blood primarily. And by blood, I mean, basically a cut in the skin or in another mucosal surface in the body. C is much more severe in terms of the impact in this country. 85% of the people who are infected become chronic carriers. So the overall rate of people becoming more severely infected is higher. With hepatitis C, again, a lot of people, 50%, won't know that they were infected.
Can they spread it at that stage?
They can, anytime you're infected or a chronic carrier, you can spread the infection. So if they're asymptomatic, they don't know they're sick, they've never had any symptoms, and they're going around, walking around fine, and then, 10 years down the road, oh gosh, I'm really worn out. Why am I feeling so tired? Oh, my stomach's upset a lot.
Yeah.
Why is my stomach upset? Oh, I have a little pain down in here. Why do I have this pain?
It builds and builds.
And these symptoms are so unremarkable and like other symptoms for other things that they wouldn't think that they would have hepatitis off the top of their head.
Briefly, so we don't have much time, how can we stop ourselves getting any of these hepatitis?
Well, hepatitis A, the fecal oral, if you wash your hands, you're going to be in much better shape.
But if you eat contaminated food,
you don't have any chance if you do that.
Right.
Your only hope is that someone will pick up a symptomatic case and recognize the source of the infection. Hepatitis B and C, I think probably the major ways that it's spread in the adult population is through having sex or having unsafe sex. So protecting in that way is important. Also, not using drugs in the case of hepatitis C and B. Injection drug use is right now a major source of infection in the U.S. population, and even cocaine use has been linked to hepatitis C spread.
Well, thank you. We've run out of time. A very big thank you to Dr. Leslye Johnson of the NIH for sharing her knowledge about hepatitis and how we can avoid catching the viruses. I'm Cathy Kristiansen, and this has been In Sickness and in Health.
The phrase "gifts from the sea" has a special meaning here at Matoka Beach Cabins on the Chesapeake Bay in Calvert County, Maryland. They look like ordinary seashells, don't they? Well, they're not. Virtually everything on the beach is a fossil, deposited here 15, 20 million years ago, when this land was covered by a shallow sea. Fossils fall from the eroding cliffs into the surf. They are easy to find, but sometimes tricky to identify.
Yeah, what we do is I have a little show display over there, and I show the kids what you can find. Tell them that the water was warm and the coral grew and the barnacles were here. Everything was huge, and the big old chessie pectins or scallop shells, and then tell them that they can use a sifter or they can just walk along the beach and find the shark's teeth. Most of your shells from the Miocene are pale white. And so everything you pick up is a piece of one shell or another.
Connie Smith has her own collection, gathered over 30 years of living here just east of St. Leonard, where she and her husband rent out rustic cabins from April through October. Beach access is year-round. Most of us will have to be content with something much smaller than this. And this whale's vertebrae is a rare find. Interested in learning more? Continue down Route 4 to the tiny waterfront town of Solomons, where the Patuxent River meets the Chesapeake Bay.
Here at the Calvert Marine Museum, we have a massive collection. We have the largest Miocene fossil collection outside of the Smithsonian. And many of these items are displayed in a series of drawers that you can open up and try to identify what you found along the beach, and as well as the staff that we have here will help identify what you've found. Our biggest attraction here in our fossil hall is our megalodon. It's the 38-foot long shark skeleton of what these big giant great white sharks here that got up to over 50 feet long, what they were like.
Of course, the museum is much more than fossils.
The Drum Point Lighthouse, which is behind me, one of the last screw pile type lighthouses, is a very popular exhibit. People come just to see that lighthouse and other lighthouses in the area. In January we have winter lights, and we talk about lighthouses and have different speakers about lighthouses. And of course our river otters are very popular, Bubbles and Squeak. They really like to interact with the kids, and they're quite popular.
During the warmer months, from spring through fall, you'll want to take a cruise on the historic William B. Tennyson. This one-hour tour gives you a real feel for what it was like to live and work on the water in years past.
Well, Solomon's is a wonderful place to visit, especially for the weekends, because it gives you a chance to get away from everything else. It has shops and wonderful restaurants. There's 6 B&Bs and a couple of hotels, and so it's a nice place to come down and relax. It's a beautiful boardwalk and a nice new pavilion that the county has provided. You can fish off the pier. You can rent a boat to go sailing or go motorboating or fishing.
And don't think of Solomon's as just a warm weather destination. Winter is the best season for fossil hunting, with winter storms bringing lots of fossils onto the beach. The museum has year-round programs as well. Atoka Beach Cabins and Solomon's. Discoveries year-round. For the Weekend Traveler, I'm Chuck Barber.
Butterfingers, crushed cantaloupe, cheddar cheese, Chester Cheeto, cheese nips, and nacho cheese Doritos. You all give me that feeling of satis, the walk home from school faction. 35 cents in my light blue Catholic school blouse. Mr. Cacciatore or something always had his eye on me, knew I wanted a Reese cup. Or maybe sometime when I was at the Acme and I had to get that peanut butter Captain Crunch because that box was oh so. Orangutans don't appeal to me though. Sunsets don't make me hungry, only plastic packages, or sometimes the natural ones with sun-kissed on the skin. I'm older now, moved up to peanut butter granola bars and peach mango sorbet, maybe an occasional piece of pizza, because you know, red and yellow, they make your eyes pop out and your stomach sing.
On a winter night, I keep looking for the light. And all the times when I can't understand, I keep reaching hand. All I ever wanted was to be with you, for your love to see me through. All I ever wanted was to be among friends, and that's all I'll ever want till the end. The night a woman first came to my bed, warm and smooth like sand beneath my bare skin. I looked in her eyes, listened to her laugh, and I held out my arms and I welcomed her in, saying, all I ever wanted was to be with you, for your love to see me through. All I ever wanted was to be among friends, and that's all I'll ever want till the end. Then I wandered the streets far away from my home, holding myself deep within, trying to make it alone, knowing that violence would never break my will, wishing I could tell my folks that I wanted them still. I'd say, all I ever wanted was to be with you, for your love to see me through. All I ever wanted was to be among friends, and that's all I'll ever want till the end. And often when I try to find words for a song, I sing of lost lovers when I know all along lovers only leave you in the most visible way, but anything that can give you love has the power to betray. And someday, when time takes hold and dissolves me through the ground, the spirits of others will join with mine, and we'll sing like lost ones finally found. All I ever wanted was to be with you, for your love to see me through. All I ever wanted was to be among friends, and that's all I'll ever want till the end. And that's all I'll ever want till the end.
Hi, and welcome to a second look at the Coffee House. Ever wonder how these internet companies can afford to pay for all the reams of words they make available to you and me? Guess what? They don't bother to pay. At least they don't pay some of the folks who actually wrote the words. Now the writers, most of them freelancers, are striking back. In one recent court case, they won $7.25 million, and more lawsuits are pending. With me in the studio is Janice Shields, a grievance officer for the National Writers Union. Hi, welcome to the Coffee House.
Thank you.
Let's say I'm a writer. Actually, I am a writer. And we'll get my bias on the table right here and now. But in the real world, how does this affect me? I mean, who is going to steal from me?
Well, you could write an article, say, for the Post. The Post puts it on its web page. It pays you for the print rights, but doesn't pay you for the electronic rights.
Okay, so, and what type of article would I be writing that would be of interest to the Post? Anything, possibly.
Pretty much anything, yeah.
Well, and there are real-life cases of this happening, not just hypothetical ones.
Yes, the case you talked about that the Writers Union just won, we won that case against publications such as the New York Times, Time Magazine, also against LexisNexis, a database.
Now, LexisNexis is a place where you go to research published articles on any given topic, right?
Right. You can search either current articles, or lawyers use it a lot to search for cases.
And so that would be an obvious place. That'd be who owns NexusLexis? Do we know? Some big corporation. Let's assume. All right. But that's NexusLexis is obviously in the business of trying to glom onto all the articles they can, right?
Right.
Yeah. In Time, in the New York Times, they have their own electronic syndicates, correct?
Well, you can get, there's
can get-
CD. What we're looking at are CD-ROMs, databases, websites, where writers' works are placed on these electronic sources, but the writer never gave permission for their works to be placed there, and they weren't compensated.
And the Times and Time Magazine and everybody else is making money.
Right. That's what the judges said.
Right.
Where's the money changing hands? You're getting money, the writers aren't.
So one of the things that galls me the most about this is Time Warner, right? They were on the other side of this not so long ago, claiming that they were being misused and exploited and ripped off for.
Well,
explain that.
Yeah, they're a group of big media conglomerates, the major networks, sports channels, that have gotten together because they're concerned about internet providers that are taking, say, for example, broadcast sports and running it on the internet, and then people can just tap into the internet. They're screaming piracy. Well, we're saying, New York Times, Time Magazine, you're taking our works without our permission and placing it on your electronic databases, and we're screaming piracy. You're violating the Copyright Act. You don't have our permission, and you're not paying us.
Right. You're just accusing them of what they were accusing the folks who were taking the sports footage and running it. And to top it all off, this is the best one. Boston Globe wants writers to sign in perpetuity, right?
They want to cover themselves because what happened was before, say, the electronic means like internet became so popular, the contract said we grant first North American print serial rights. Okay. So now the web pages come along, internet comes along, and they're just putting our works on the electronic sources and again, not paying us. Well, what they want to do is cover themselves and make us sign contracts that say they cover any sort of media that's existing now, existed in the past, or could be developed in the future.
Right, any possibility.
Right.
It's all ours, and the writers get, they get zero. But
they get paid for their article.
They get paid for the original article,
right.
But we're talking about secondary rights, that you get one fee, and that's it. Now, look at it, though, from the point of view of a reader, as I was trying to. I'm a reader. I go to the library. I don't have to worry about. Authors allow their books to go to libraries where they're used endlessly by the consumer, by the reader. How is that different than having your words go out electronically on the internet?
Well, what we're concerned with is that, again, we didn't grant permission and we're not being paid, but yet everybody else is getting paid. The people who subscribe to, pay a large amount for LexisNexis subscriptions to use that database, for instance. That money goes to LexisNexis, but if we haven't granted permission, for example, for our articles to be placed on LexisNexis, we're not getting any money out of that. So
okay, and I agree. That there's zillions of people making zillions of dollars, it seems, off the internet, and I'm not one of them. So, So right there and then and there, I agree with you. But what about the writers themselves? Have you taken a poll? I mean, look at it this way: if I'm a writer, maybe I don't care about the money. Maybe I would rather that my well-written, well-researched, etc. words get out on the internet, and then I have more influence, and maybe I care more about other things than money.
Well, we run into that a lot, especially, say, with academic writers, because they need to get published to get tenure. So they're not as concerned as, say, a freelance writer would be with getting paid. This is where the National Writers Union is very important, because we need to bring writers together and let them understand how important it is to work as a group to enter into contracts with these various publications. Say, no, we're not going to, sign an all rights contract, which is what the Boston Globe and a number of other publications are trying for, but rather, we'll sell you the print rights, and then the other rights you pay more for. In the same sense as, you wouldn't have a contractor come in and build a house and say, I want the garage for free,
Right, you got to pay for both.
You got to pay for both, and what we're saying is, with intellectual property, it works the same way. We'll provide the print copy, the house, but if you want the electronic version, the garage, you need to give us another 15% is what we recommend.
Right. In the future, who knows how long it will be before the garage becomes the house.
Right.
I mean, that the primary market becomes the internet. Which is already happening. I mean, there are internet magazines and so forth, and no one's called me yet, but I'm available. Is there, will this have to be hassled out in the courts and all the way to the Supreme Court, or is there a way to sort of work it out? Are there solutions that are possible here?
Well, we're looking at a variety of different solutions. We did win on appeal in the Ticini case. Now the publishers want the Supreme Court to hear the case. We don't know if they will or not. So there's that aspect. We have set up what's called a publication rights clearinghouse, where people who want to use our articles instead of just copying them would pay for the right to use them. So if they want to put it on their website, for example, they would contact the publication rights clearinghouse run by the National Writers Union. They would pay a fee for that, and the Publication Rights Clearinghouse then would send that fee on to the writer. So the writer would get paid for the use of their work. One of the problems that we run into is that people say, the publishers or the electronic media people say, well, we can't find the writer. And we'll say, oh, but we'll find them for you.
Good. Well, that seems simple and straightforward in a fairly complex case. Thank you. Thank you, Janice Shields, for your time, free of charge. I think the essential point of this story is that most writers want something out of life other than lots and lots of money. But let's face it, nobody wants to get ripped off. I'm Howard Cohen, and this has been A Second Look.
Walk with me through this green and growing land. Walk through the meadows and the mountains and the sands. Walk through the valleys and the rivers and the plains. Walk through the sun and walk through the rain. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. For her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Glory shall rest on us all. From Colorado, Kansas, and the Carolinas to Virginia and Alaska, from the old to the new, Texas and Ohio and the California shore. Tell me who could ask for more? Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. For her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom. Glory shall rest on us all. For she's only as rich as the poorest of the poor, only as free as a padlocked prison door,
only as strong as our love for this land, only as tall as we stand. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. For her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom, glory shall rest on us all. Come and take a walk with me through this green and growing land. Walk through the meadows and the mountains and the sand. Walk through the valleys and the rivers and the plains. Walk through the sun and walk through the rain. Here is a land full of power and glory, beauty that words cannot recall. For her power shall rest on the strength of her freedom, glory shall rest on us all, on us all.
That's it for this edition. See you next time in A Coffee House.